Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Launchpad. I'm your host, Dave Kluge. As always, joined with two amazing guests. Today, we have Rich Hribar from Sharp Football Analysis, and we have Jakob Sanderson from Roto Underworld. We're going to be looking at some Week 3 matchups and talking about some pretty polarizing players. First of all, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers are off to awful starts this season. Can you rely on them in your fantasy football lineups? If not, how about Tua Tagovailoa and Carson Wentz, who are looking red hot? Are they QB1s for the rest of the season? We're going to talk about Allen Robinson and his kind of odd start to the year. We're wondering if Zach Ertz can maintain his pace through the rest of the season. After Justin Jefferson was capped by Darius Slay last week, should we be concerned with him going forward? Probably not, but we got some fun things that we're going to talk about. So be sure to stick through to the very end of this week's episode of The Launchpad. Currently the QB 29 and QB 30 in fantasy football scoring. Should we still be valuing Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady as QB1s in fantasy football? That and so much more on today's episode of The Launchpad. Rich, go ahead and start us off here. We were looking at both of these guys as QB1s to start the season. After 2 weeks, is it time to adjust and push them out of that territory?
It was time to adjust for Aaron Rodgers before the season, and I was way ahead. And last week, I had Tom Brady buried as a QB2 ahead of time. I was telling people to play Carson Wentz over him. So, I'm definitely there this week. This is the lowest implied total the Packers have had with Aaron Rodgers as starter since week 1 of the 2014 season, when it was like the apex of the Legion of Boom days, and they only scored 16 points that game. And this is the lowest implied total the Bucs have had since Tom Brady's been the starter. And it inherently makes a lot of sense as we dive into the state of both of these offenses.
Now, I think the problem is, in looking at consensus rankings right now, both of these guys are still right in the QB1 range. And it's just name value alone at this point that's keeping these guys propped up. If we look at what they're doing, they shouldn't be valued there. I just tweeted something out about cutting Tom Brady, and I'm already getting some flack back for it. But I don't think there's any reason to hold on to him unless you're in a deep league or a super flex league at this point. Jacob, how are you feeling? If you're in a one quarterback league and you've got Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, are you still holding these guys? Are you thinking that they can still pop, or is this kind of what we're looking at? Older guys and low volume offenses with no rushing upside.
So I think they're a little different. I think Rodgers, this is what it is for Aaron Rodgers, right? He doesn't have any weapons. So unless either Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs, to me, if one of them takes a massive leap forward as a rookie, maybe gives him something unexpected, then maybe that opens up some stuff for Rodgers. But he has really been outperforming his peripherals for a while based on efficiency that's down to him being phenomenal, Devontae Adams being phenomenal, because they've been running this super slow-paced offense for a while. They're not particularly pass-heavy either. So if they're going to be slow, they're not going to pass a ton, and he doesn't run anymore. He's really relying on efficiency. And I just don't think he's going to have outlier level efficiency with this cast of characters that he's throwing to. So Rodgers, I was well below consensus on him in this season as well. And I wouldn't be comfortable starting him at all in a one QB league. I probably don't feel great about Brady in this spot because the Packers are so slow, because he's still hurting without Evans. I don't know if he's going to have Godwin. Seems probably not this week. But I do think that if we try to fast forward to when he has Godwin back and Evans back, then I do think we're still going to see at least low-end QB1 performances out of Tom Brady. But for as long as his top wide receivers are like Russell Gage, Cole Beasley, and Brashad Perryman, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that that's what he's going into this week. And like I said, looking at the week 3 consensus rankings, seeing both of these guys still ranked as QB1s is kind of mind-blowing to me. But anyway, we'll still talk more about this game. But before we do that, let's jump into some quick introductions here. Middle of the screen, I am joined with Rich Hribar. You can find most of his work over at Sharp Football Analysis. But Rich, you're kind of all over the place, guesting on shows all the time, putting some great content out there on Twitter as well. Let everyone know where they can find you on social media and what you are working on this season.
Hey, listen, at Lord Reeves on Twitter. Sharpfootballanalysis.com is where the worksheet is and everything I do this season. On multiple podcasts on the Sharp Angles feed, and that's basically it. We're just here grinding. We're building up that sample. For us people that are objective analysts and we look for our evidence-based, we're trying to just keep accruing information.
You're Bayesian, Rich. You're Bayesian.
Yeah, this time of year is fun. There's a lot of creativity in the off season, but we have to take every little tiny story and stretch it over a 48-hour period talking about it. And now there's just so much information coming in that we almost cannot process it quickly enough. This time of year is a lot of fun, but very, very different from the off season. Right side of my screen, I am joined with Jakob Sanderson. You can find him over at Roto Underworld. He's also got the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast. And Jacob, I didn't even have a time to update the show sheet, but you just announced another show that you're doing with Drew. So talk to us a little bit about that and let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, we were going to debut this after week 1, and then the audio got lost, and then it never made it. We would have had to release it on like Saturday. We were like, well, that's going to be all out of date in one day anyhow, so let's just do the next week. And yeah, so I started a show with Drew Ozenchuk. I think people would know him as the DF Bean Counter or Bulletproof Bean Counter in Dynasty Streets. Mostly a Dynasty show, but we're going to talk in season. A lot of that would apply to redraft as well, and any sort of managed format league. Sorry for the sirens going on in the background. Apologies. Apparently, we're having some emergencies right now up here in Canada. Maybe it's Scott Barrett leading his 80,000 followers in battle against. But anyhow, yeah, so I did launch a new show there. That's super fun. We're going to be talking all forms of Dynasty strategy on that. And I agree with Rich. This is one of the most fun times possible to talk about fantasy football because we get all this new information. And I think one thing that I've really changed my tune on this year, and especially maybe looking at last year, was I always used to think like, oh, it's the easy time to sell high and buy low, etc. And like that's become so ingrained in people's minds now that I think it's like the more interesting thing is like which buy highs are you willing to do, you know, where the market maybe hasn't quite caught up to just how much higher they should have been than they were 2 weeks ago. And how can you kind of sort through that cognitive dissonance where, yeah, like, sorry, there's a guy that you were drafting in round 6, you know, but actually, sorry, you should have been a round 2 pick. And like, yes, it's okay that we can sort of make those big leaps this quickly. We see that happen every year. So that's a really fun spot to try and identify whose rise is a little bit more fraudulent and who's actually well-founded to the extent where the market hasn't even quite caught up enough.
Yeah, I mean, if you're still holding on to ADP now as we head into week 3, you are already losing. We have had to, adjust our stances on a lot of players. Things are changing after we see that real life football. So completely agree with you, both of you. This is a really fun time of year. So just want to thank everybody for tuning into episode 47 now of the Launchpad. Last week I was with John Daigle and Dalton Cates. We were looking at week 2. And of course, today we are going to be looking at week 3 matchups with Rich and Jacob. We already talked about this Green Bay Packers and Tampa Bay game a little bit. Like we said, over under 41, which is just crazy seeing Rodgers and Brady going up against each other. But the question I want to ask is about this backfield. It seems like there's more than enough to go around for both Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. So, Rich, start us off here. Are both of these guys must-starts every week, or are you kind of looking at each game individually and deciding what to do with these running backs?
Well, Aaron Jones is a must start. You're just going to have to live with the peaks and valleys because he's the entire offense. If you look at any Packers successful drive this season, it has happened due to a big play Aaron Jones has created. That's their offense right now, is how efficient can he be? Now, there's going to be spouts of inefficiency from him as well, and that's when the offense is probably going to be really at its low point, bogged down, unless, like Jacob said, one of these rookie receivers really starts to make vertical plays in this offense. But you'll just have to live with it with Aaron Jones, and he's going to be a guy that's going to catch the ball in the backfield. We kind of talked about in the Sharp Angles podcast, like we expected him when they get into the red zone that those jet passes and all that motion work that they used to do with Devontae, that's going to be all Aaron Jones this year. And you got to see a little bit against the Bears. Those should not count as passing stats either for Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is going to get by.
He needs what he can get, man. Don't take it away. He needs everything you can get, Rich.
So, yeah, Aaron Rodgers right now, 39% of his passes thrown behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage, highest rate in the NFL. League rate is 21%. It's because they know, too, the entire offense is Aaron Jones. So you're just going to live with Aaron Jones. Algiers Jameer Dillon is completely still touchdown dependent. This dude has not had an effective fantasy game in his career yet without a touchdown. And until he starts pulling those, like he's still just a touchdown dependent, like guy that's on that RB2 flex line.
Are you calling him Tyler Algiers Jameer Dillon?
Yes, I may be in a roundabout way. Love the player, but like still like he still comes with a little bit more volatility and not really a high ceiling either without Aaron Jones off the field.
Right. And Jacob, you and I feel like we've been kind of like leading this A.J. Dillon charge dating all the way back to 2020. Like you and I both really like A.J. Dillon, but I have started to kind of look at him a little bit differently now, just being in Aaron Jones' shadow. We might not see him fully unleashed for another year or two until A.J. Dillon gets out or until Aaron Jones gets out of Green Bay. But how are you feeling about him this week specifically? Are you willing to fire up A.J. Dillon in your lineups?
Not this week. Not a good. I mean, Tampa hasn't been like quite as elite against the run this year as they have been in years past. But I'm not entirely sure how much of that is 2-week noise versus if that's a real thing. But at least if that's holding, then it's not usually the matchup that you want to start a run first running back against Tampa Bay. And maybe even if even if Tampa isn't actually as good as the run, you're almost playing like some sort of 3D chess where it's like the Packers still think Tampa's really elite against the run, so they might not want to run that much against them, and then they're going to build a game plan that doesn't involve a bunch of Dillon runs up the middle. So probably not a great Dillon week. I've been all in on Dillon's talent like since he was drafted. I'm a big fan of the player. And if Aaron Jones was to be not on the team next year, I'd probably be happy to draft AJ Dillon at like the 1-2 turn. I'm a huge fan of the player. But yeah, I probably drafted the least AJ Dillon this year that I ever drafted just because the cost was so much higher. And like, I think in a best ball format, it made a lot of sense where it's like, okay, you get a usable player and you're going to get spike weeks that work in, and you have the contingent upside, and like paying way more for the contingency is kind of worth it because you're going to get way more usable weeks from a Dillon, similar to a Pollard that you're going to get from, say, an Alexander Madison or a Rashad White, where it's literally just we either get, hopefully the RB1 production if the lead backs out, or we get literally nothing. And that's not the case with Dillon and with Pollard. But with Dillon in managed, like he was not a guy I was targeting in managed specifically, just because like I don't think him at RB2 is all that different than a bunch of other guys who kind of go later. And then the contingent upside is awesome, but you can get similar contingent bets also a lot later. Just kind of a tough spot for me. And yeah, there's weeks like this week where like you don't really want to start him. So I feel great about Jones. People were kind of worried about Jones after week 1. I said that I was buying Aaron Jones after week 1. Are people new to Aaron Jones? Like, this is what happens. Like he has frustrating weeks where you're like, why is Aaron Jones not getting the ball? And he's so efficient, whatever, but he's going to have the big spike weeks. It's just his running back production profile is going to be more peaks and valleys than a lot of other running backs that he gets drafted around. If you don't like that bet, don't draft him. But like, he's kind of the Tyler Lockett of running backs in that respect, where like at the end of the season, the numbers are going to look good, but it is going to come in peaks and valleys.
It's time for the Sleeper Start of the Week, powered by Sleeper.
Coming off a 170-yard performance last week against the Chicago Bears, Aaron Jones is a smash play this week. The most recent injury report for the Packers shows Allen Lazard, Christian Watson, Sammy Watkins, and Randall Cobb all dealing with injuries and being questionable for this matchup. The offense projects to run through Aaron Jones once again. There isn't a whole lot of other talent here in Green Bay, and with the Tampa Bay defense being a little bit better than people realize, their weakness is in their secondary, where Aaron Jones can absolutely feast. I currently have him as my running back 5 for the week, and he is a guy that I am confidently starting over almost any other running back. You drafted this guy to be a running back 2, but you can confidently play him as your running back 1 this week and many weeks going forward, but I expect him to smash against the Buccaneers. This week, Aaron Jones is my sleeper start of the week. So looking at this game, had we, tried to forecast this game in the offseason, we'd be looking at so many people that we had drafted highly and we're getting excited about. But now that we're actually into week 3 and dealing with injuries and seeing this new offense, Aaron Jones is the guy we're confident in. Leonard Fournette we're confident in. If you're desperate, maybe you plug in a Tom Brady. But Rich, talk to me about these receivers. I mean, we'll look at both sides of the ball, the Green Bay and Tampa Bay. Are there any receivers that you're confident starting this week?
No, not any level. Well, we don't know who's going to play for the Buccaneers at this point.
Or the Packers.
or the Packers.
Or on the injury list.
But I mean, really, you can say, all right, if Lazard's going to be on the field, he'll be out there. He ran 90% of the pass routes last week, but you got the Allen Lazard experience. Like, I forgot. I am on with Dave, though. I don't want to.
Yeah, be careful.
I
got tough skin. I can take it.
You're about to be excommunicated.
I mean, 2-3 targets on 90% of the pass routes. He squeezes out the touchdown. I mean, that's what you want with Allen Lazard. I mean, he is 5th among all active wide receivers in a percentage of career targets that have come in the end zone. That's what you want. That's what you want for him. So he's like a touchdown dependent wide receiver 3. The Bucs secondary has been awesome to start the year. They've played really well. So it's another one of these things. Rodgers is throwing the ball. He's not really pushing the ball downfield. Funny, these young guys are playing. They're just rotating everyone behind. So it's hard to really like any of the guys. I mean, it really is about the 2 front-end running backs that you drafted and kind of just, well, we'll see who plays, and maybe that's how we save some salary on DraftKings.
So what about Russell Gage? Talk to me about Russell Gage a little bit. Either of you can take this, but Russell Gage was like everybody's, favorite guy this offseason, and that was on a team with,
favorite guy this offseason.
I mean, he was getting drafted in the 6th round at one point. He got.
Oh yes, no, I only refer to him. rest of his entire career as former round 6 underdog pick Russell Gage. I refuse to refer to him by any other name.
As we should, but people spent
pick
premium draft capital on this guy at some point in the offseason. If there's ever a week to play him, this has to be it. So, Jacob, I mean, is Russell Gage a guy that you're plugging in as a wide receiver 3 or a flex?
Yeah, I mean, no. But if you were on the Gage train and you think that Russell Gage is good, like this would be the time to do it, right? Like if the thesis of Russell Gage was that Godwin's going to miss the early portion of the season, he kind of got a suck out on that where he was ready week 1 and then he gets re-injured. And then, Mike Evans was supposed to be, he was never included in this Russell Gage fear. You might have no Julio, no Evans, no Godwin in this game. So if there's ever a time to play Russell Gage, it's now. I would expect that that probably he doesn't see that much Jair Alexander. I don't know. Rich charts like the deployment and stuff way more closely than I do. So maybe he could provide a better answer on that. But I would expect maybe if he's more on the outside, then you see more Perriman, something like that. It's just tough for me. Like Gage last week had this opportunity where he had no Julio, no Godwin. He's not dealing with any Marshawn Lattimore snaps. And he gets no Evans for most of the second half. And still he gets alphaed by Scotty Miller and Rashad Perriman. So I just think it's kind of similar to the Packers where it's going to get spread a lot. If you had to give me one wide receiver to play in this game of anyone, it probably would be Gage. But it would be really, really tough for me to play any of these guys. And with the Packers, yeah, like Rich said, like I think I'm holding out some level of hope that maybe in the late season that either Dobbs or Watson is able to secure as many routes in this offense as Allen Lazard. Like I think maybe they're just kind of rotating guys until they figure out who the guys are that they actually want to play. And maybe if one of those shows target earning capacity, but like they haven't really yet, more than Watson in terms of targets per route and such. But it's certainly been a little bit grim. I mean, what was it last week? They had 24 pass attempts, right? And they had Watkins at 4 targets and then a 6-way tie at 3. So, I mean, that's just disgustingly spread out. You either need a touchdown or you need a long play. And we saw Watson could have had both in week 1. Watkins got the long play week 2. Lazard gets a touchdown. But like otherwise, it's like Bagel City.
So the last guy I want to talk about in this game is Rachaad White. And obviously, if you're in a dynasty league or if you're in a redraft league with really deep benches, you're stashing Rachaad White. But let's talk about, the 10 to 12 team leagues that have 5 or 6 bench spots where you don't have a ton of depth and you can sit on these guys all season. What should those types of fantasy managers be doing right now with Rachaad White? Are you keeping him? Are you cutting him? Are you trying to trade him? Rich, start us off here. What should guys in smaller fantasy leagues be doing with Rachaad White at this point?
I want to hold him anywhere I can, and this is the type of guy that I love because this is the type of guy that gets squeezed off of the rosters because they have to let him go, and then I come and grab him up when they have to let him go. I'm with Jacob. I expect the Buccaneers offense to get better as the season goes along, as they get healthier. And that might also mean Leonard Fournette also gets worse because he already has dealt with a hamstring injury. He's never played a full season. He's accruing just a monster workload by default to start the season, probably a larger workload than they even want to give him at this point, just because he's the only healthy offensive player they have, which probably doesn't really bode well for his sustainability either. So, yeah, I mean, I want to hold Rachaad White. He's an electric pass catcher. He's a big play waiting to happen. So, I mean, I want to have him on my rosters while I can, especially when this offense is going to hit its apex.
Yeah, I knew you were going to answer the question that way, and that was basically just me wanting the listeners to hear and know, do not cut Rachaad White. He's pretty much in Alexander Madison territory. It doesn't matter what he is doing on any given week. You are holding him and stashing him for that contingent upside at some point this season. So thank you for agreeing with me, Rich. I had a feeling you would. But
I just wanted to butt in really quick because I think that a lot of people have – like I've seen the Rachaad White discourse on Twitter and people were always comparing him vis-a-vis Fournette and like, oh, what's he going to get next to Fournette? What's he going to get next to Fournette? Kind of doesn't matter. Like, I don't know. His role's been maybe slightly smaller than I thought it would be. Maybe it'll grow a little bit more in the season. Really doesn't matter much to me. Like either he'll be total 0 or he'll be like getting 6 points a week. I guess that matters in best ball, but in managed, it's entirely irrelevant. All that matters is, does Leonard Fournette get hurt? What we should have been tracking is what's Rachaad White vis-a-vis Bernard and Vaughn. And Vaughn's been a healthy scratch for 2 weeks. Giovanni Bernard is now on IR. So if Leonard Fournette gets hurt, we can't know what's going to happen, but the expectation would be that Rachaad White would be at least the lead. And who knows, maybe he's a full blown workhorse. So that's what should be the exciting portion, not about what Fournette's doing.
Yep. Could not agree more. Now let's go ahead and talk about the Detroit Lions going to the Minnesota Vikings. Again, if we forecast in the offseason, we would never expect that this game would have way more fantasy relevance than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Green Bay Packers. But here we are. And the first guy I want to talk about is Amon-Ra St. Brown, 8 straight games with 8 or more receptions and a touchdown. He is just on a tear right now. And this was a guy who I was trying to sell a little bit this offseason. I didn't think that his production, on a small sample size at the end of the season was going to carry over. And I am already eating my crow, serving it up for myself. He looks like a bona fide superstar. So going forward, not looking at dynasty, but rest of the season here, Jacob, I'll let you take the floor on this one because I know you are a big Amon-Ra St. Brown guy. How high are we valuing this guy? I mean, do we put him in the Cup Jefferson Diggs tier already, or is he still a little bit below those guys?
He's got to be below those guys, but I think he's certainly, like, if I was redrafting today, mid to late round 2, that'd be crazy. Mid to late round 2.
I mean, right around the same time as AJ Brown, and yeah, why not?
Yeah, like I think that the Lions are off to like an unsustainably hot start in the sense that they played their first 2 weeks. The first week was entirely in catch-up mode against the Eagles. Second week, they play against the Commanders defense that I think is quite bad. It was a really bad passing defense last year, and especially against slot wide receivers. They got blitzed by Christian Kirk in the first week as well. So I don't think he's going to keep up this level of efficiency. I think he's going to have more lines like week 1 than week 2, where it's like lots of targets, and really safe floor. But I think I still probably view him like this offense is definitely better than like the Steelers or the Texans, where you're looking at like a Cooks or a Deontay as one of these high target share, but in a woeful offense guys. Like the Dolphins are definitely a step ahead of that. The Lions, sorry. But I think maybe like where we would view him is like kind of what we were hoping DJ Moore would be, like when we thought that the Panthers would be maybe not good, but would have base competence. It doesn't look like they do have base competence, but that's kind of where I would view Amon-Ra, like high target share in a competent, if not elite offense. It's still going to be lower ADOT stuff. I think that the efficiency is going to wane. He's not going to be breaking off 60-yard runs every single week. So maybe early round 3, late round 2, that type of level value. But I mean, he's a smash, probably back in wide receiver 1, in my opinion.
Yeah, completely agree with that. And this is the first week where I have fully just got on board with Amon-Ra St. Brown, put him inside my top 8, and I am ready to go. But the other guy I want to talk about who has been red hot, not so much in a usage, but he is finding the end zone, is Jamal Williams. He has been a red zone workhorse. He has the most carries inside the 20-yard line, most carries inside the 10-yard line, second most carries inside the 5-yard line. So, Rich, kind of a 2-part question here. 1, does this limit DeAndre Swift's ceiling, or is it just kind of fluky? And 2, for people who drafted 0 running back or people who had Najee Harris dealing with an injury now, is he somebody that you can kind of play as a desperation RB2 this week?
No, I don't think we're there with Jamal Williams. He's really only ever been useful when he's had the backfield either one all to himself or fallen into the end zone on a play that was set up by a player that was superior to him, which is what has happened. Definitely happened in week 1.
I like running backs who don't get tackled.
Since joining the Lions, he has 1 top 24 scoring week in a game without a touchdown, and 1 other week is a top 36 score without a touchdown. That's just where we are. DeAndre Swift, if there was no Jamal Williams, probably he might be the RB1 the rest of the season. He'd be in that kind of contention. The dude is a huge play waiting to happen every time he touches the football. Also, DeAndre Swift, even for sharing workload to this point in his career, he scored a touchdown in 61% of his career NFL games. Only Jonathan Taylor has a higher rate among running backs. So Swift is one of these guys, like, we're just waiting for Jamal Williams to get the hell out of the way so we can completely take off the tarmac. But listen, DeAndre Swift is excellent, and he makes Jamal Williams good by setting him up with red zone touches.
I mean, Jamal Williams is doing what he's done his entire career. When he was in Green Bay, we were just hoping he'd leave and finally unleash Aaron
Super
Jones.
cool dude, though.
Yeah, super great guy.
Awesome.
Loves his anime, great jokes, a lot of fun on Hard Knocks. But let's talk about
a broadcasting company just like hire him so that he stops getting in the way of the running backs we want to draft. Like, we could still hear him talk about anime and do all sorts of great skits. Right. It'd be fun. But then, like, we could just have DeAndre Swift be like a clear, like, top of the first round pick. It'd be great.
Yeah, there's got to be some NFL Network executive that has DeAndre Swift on his fantasy team, and he's just going to call Jamal Williams up after this week and say, "Hey, man, why don't you just come work for us instead?" But the other guy I want to talk about is just, he looked like a demigod week 1, Justin Jefferson, and then in week 2, we saw Darius Slay put the clamp on him. And I mean, you can kind of chalk it up to Kirk Cousins not having his best game and forcing some balls to Justin Jefferson that he probably shouldn't have. But Jeff Okudah is no scrub, and Justin Jefferson draws another pretty tough matchup this week. So, Jacob, do we have any concerns? I mean, you're still starting him, but is this, are we not just going to be looking at a 20-point floor from Justin Jefferson every single week?
It's just the power of touchdowns, man. First week, Amon-Ra St. Brown against the same team, the Eagles. He has 12 targets, 8 for 64. Justin Jefferson, week 2 against the Eagles, 12 targets for 6 for 48. And Amon-Ra scores the touchdown, so it's like it's victory lap central. Justin Jefferson doesn't get the touchdown. It's bad. I mean, he had 1 million targets in a tough matchup. He's not often going to be averaging under 5 yards per target. So, there's no player on earth that has even a 20-point floor. Christian McCaffrey has even proven that to us this year. So I don't think that that's the case, but Justin Jefferson probably, maybe you get certainly Kupp. You can make an argument for Diggs, although his route participation is still like kind of a tiny little minor fly in the ointment for me. But I would feel like really, really great about Justin Jefferson still. It would still be a clear top 5 pick for me rest of the way in the season. Yeah, no, zero concerns.
So the last guy I want to talk about, who I think people are probably a little bit more concerned about, and Rich, talk to me about Dalvin Cook, because right now he is sitting as the RB28. I mean, this guy was demanding a first-round draft capital this offseason, and so far has not looked good. We're seeing a lot more of Alexander Madison than we want to. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, just as calm as a Buddhist cow, and 10 being running around a firework factory with your hair on fire, how much are we panicking when it comes to Dalvin Cook?
I mean, not a ton at this point. I mean, the usage was completely there that we wanted in week 1. We saw also the Kevin O'Connell system installing the amount of 11 personnel runs that we were going to have. He was hyper efficient with those runs out of 11 personnel in week 1. And then week 2, I think it's just kind of a throwaway week. I mean, he had 10 touches last week that would match a career low, and it was a career low in a game he didn't exit early. The passing usage has been kind of nice. The route participation's been solid for him. I think looks like a really good bounce back spot if he doesn't hit at home as a 6-point favorite against the Lions defense that we've been kind of circling as being the kind of a team that is going to play in these types of kind of fun bonanza type games, which I have a pretty sound theory on this, why this is happening too, but I am not really that concerned right now because everything's where you want it to be. The results just haven't been there.
So let's hear. I mean, expand on that a little bit. You said you got a sound theory as to why the Lions are in these games. Let's hear it.
Well, yeah, because so the NFL with all these good young quarterbacks has really shifted. Scoring's been down. Obviously, the pandemic influenced a couple of years ago when we had the highest scoring season in the NFL season. But one thing we're continuously seeing is teams continuously reduce the use of man coverage and blitzing. It's continuously gone down. Well, the Lions aren't one of those teams. The Lions play man coverage at the league's highest rate, and they blitz at the league's 4th highest rate. They are a hyper-aggressive defense, which induces them to give up big plays, and that's why they are playing in these fun shootout games to open the year. If Aaron Glenn is going to keep being really aggressive because they just don't have the personnel, then they're going to keep continuously giving up big plays and playing in these types of games. So you're seeing it like a lot of the too high safety, like my grandma now knows about too high safety because it's been talked to her about the last 2 years. But like, it's a continuous truth. Teams are willing, like my boss has been on this big Justin Herbert ADOT train of why it's low and it's all Joe Lombardi's fault. But like, I'm trying to bring up all these other points of why his ADOT's low. The defense is playing. He's throwing to slot receiver and a running back. Like this, opposing defenses now are hell-bent on not getting beat by like 1-play touchdowns anymore. The Bengals are going through this now at the start of the year. They're now the new team that's getting targeted like the Chiefs were the last couple of years. But you've seen it with the Chargers and everybody else. Like teams want to sit back. They want to play shell coverage. The teams that we talked about already, like the Vikings, the opposite side, they go and hire Ed Donatel, who's worked under Vic Fangio. They played zone coverage 98% of passing snaps. Jonathan Gannon, who kind of took away, it wasn't Darius Slay that necessarily took away. They were in zone coverage like the highest rate that they were like in week 2. It's the fact that they got rid of playing more quarters coverage like the Packers did in week 1 that Kevin O'Connell eviscerated. That just kind of set it up. So it's like it wasn't like Darius Slay went and played man coverage on Justin Jefferson and that's how they won the game. That didn't happen. That's not what happened in the game. And that's why we get down in the weeds in these cornerback wide receiver matchups. I mean, look at the amount of zone coverage teams are playing in the NFL. And even a team like I talked about, like the Lions, who blitz at the league's highest rate, are playing zone coverage on over 50% of their snaps. So if we're taking a cornerback wide receiver matchup and cutting it in half already, where man coverage is only going to be on man coverage for 50% of snaps, right? And then he has to shadow that guy the other 50% of the plays they're in man coverage. That stuff doesn't happen. We're talking about a small sample of plays in an NFL game, and we're looking at all these coverage stats for cornerbacks. They're typically out of zone, right? Like they're playing a position. It's not like they're playing a man. And that's why things like this generally lead people down false roads and make terrible lineup decisions and DFS decisions.
Well, that is some interesting insight, and I think that's more than a theory. I think that you've kind of proved it by pulling out the numbers. So I think that you're onto something there, Rich, and I will be paying close attention to that going forward. Before we move on to the next game, Jacob, real quickly, you know, we talked about Dalvin Cook a little bit, not freaking out about him. Is he somebody that you'd peg as a buy low right now? If you can go out and get Dalvin Cook for a little bit cheaper than his ADP dictates, do you think that's a good move that you can make?
Yeah, it'd probably be more than a little bit. I mean, I think that the game is really, really changing. And I think that spending this much for a lot of these running backs early, I mean, I wasn't. So I'm not like super enthused to go and buy Dalvin Cook. I also think like, what I would say why I'm not like full panic on Dalvin Cook is he might be dust. Like any running back that's his age, like there's some risk that they're just like total dust balls. But you usually get at least sort of 1 year where the running back is dust, but it doesn't show up for fantasy yet because the coaching staff still just gives them all the touches. And then usually it's like the next offseason, they go back and they're like, oh man, our running back's kind of dust. And then that's when you see their workload finally get scaled back. Currently, he's at minus 0.77 rush yards over expectation. That's really quite bad. That being said, it's a 2-week sample and it's tons and tons and tons of noise all over that. So I don't really have any firm proclamation over whether he's dust, other than that he hasn't done a lot yet and he's old. So it's like a possibility. But I think Dalvin's fine. Like he's going to have games where he's going to have touchdowns. He's going to be heard from. And he's used in the passing game. So it's not quite the same as like if Derrick Henry can't be an efficient running back anymore, then it's just over. Because like the entirety of the Derrick Henry use case has been he's going to be such an efficient running back. And he's also such an efficient running back that he's going to be one of the reasons why the Titans win games, which is integral for him to continue getting carries. Whereas like if the Titans are bad and he's no longer able to make them not bad, and then he's not that efficient anymore and he doesn't catch passes, like, well, then he's Rashad Penny, right? So then there's no difference. So I think that I'm definitely more interested in buying low on Cook than some others.
Yeah, with you there. And it's the pass catching usage that we heard about this offseason coming to fruition. That's what's still giving him, a pretty solid role in this offense. But let's talk about the AFC West. And there's a huge showdown this weekend. Buffalo Bills traveling down to Miami in what projects to be a huge shootout. And I don't think that Tua Tagovailoa is going to be able to keep his pace up of 28 fantasy points per game. But we do need to start talking about his rest of season value. I mean, he's kind of in this can't fail system that we saw prop Jimmy Garoppolo up as a back end QB1. If you think Tua Tagovailoa is as good or better than Jimmy Garoppolo, we got to start looking at, how we should value him for the rest of the season. So, Rich, start us off here. Are you looking at him as a top 12 quarterback rest of season, or are we getting a little ahead of the cart there?
No, you saw proof of concept last week. So one of the big things for people propelling Tua was the argument you just laid out. Can he just be Jimmy Garoppolo? Can he just be better? But what you really wanted was proof for proof of concept stance from Mike McDaniel is when the Dolphins have to just have a drop back passing game, can it be successful? And yeah, we got proof of concept that immediately early in the season in week 2. And now that looks like Tua is almost in like a zone where he is operating like in Alabama, where he just has the best athletes on the field, but they have those guys, in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But yeah, I thought the second half of that game was exactly what you would want to see from this offense, because we knew like the Shanahan-ian stuff would be there. But what we wanted to see is there an actual drop back passing game when they have to punch and throw themselves out of it. And we got that in week 1. I think that's an immensely positive sign. There are some maybe from some matchup concerns here, but there are also some injury things hanging up for the Bills on their side. We haven't seen Micah Hyde or Jordan Poyer practice. It's Thursday afternoon. Keep an eye on that, because if those two guys don't play, it's absolutely massive. Dane Jackson had that really scary injury on Monday night. He's probably not going to play. So we could be looking at a Bills secondary that is just reliant on a lot of young players. And they're already a team that doesn't really blitz either. So they're going to be having a lot of really young, inexperienced guys guarding Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So, I mean, there could be an opening here for Tua to kind of run this thing back a little bit, but follow the injuries on the Bills defensive side, coming into Sunday.
So
yeah, I mean, the Dolphins have all the ingredients They have the high passion over expectation, and they only play against injured secondaries. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of gifted it back to back.
Well, the Baltimore thing is a myth. Like, that one is more of a myth because Marcus Peters played, Marlon Humphrey played, Marcus Williams played, all those guys played. It was all I think they just had big communication issues. Obviously,
wasn't that Peters' first game in like a while?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
so
but
I don't think you were like that was. I don't think you're getting like full strength Marcus Peters and Humphrey. Like, he didn't practice even on Friday, so sure he was out there, but I'm not sure that was like peak form Humphrey either. So I feel like the names and the faces might have been there, but I don't know that necessarily that it was like full on like Baltimore secondary where you'd want it to be.
But it wasn't like guys were getting beat like a year ago where Wink Martindale was putting those guys in one-on-one situations and just throwing cover zero out there. All the breakdowns were communication issues.
Yeah, they weren't covering people.
It wasn't like but it wasn't like a Baltimore talent thing. It was all communication breakdowns. Like, so I think that's more of like it's almost like excuse making a little
bit. Is that almost unrelated to them all not practicing? Like, maybe if you don't ever practice and a guy hasn't played in a year, like Marcus Peters, like maybe that all is a decent correlation.
But they're also they're a team that's in a transition. Obviously Wink goes to to New York. And I'm trying to think of the name that the defensive coordinator they hired, but they're running a whole entirely different system now too. So yeah, a lot of different moving parts, but it wasn't just because all the guys like were out though. Like, they got shredded by good players. Like Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are good players. They're good NFL players. And they aren't guys that just run straight and fast.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think this offense, I mean, I think it's not super surprising that it's efficient, right? Like, they've been a super efficient offense in San Francisco with Jimmy Garoppolo, who's not very good. And certainly here, I think the surprising part to me is just how much they're passing. Like, I didn't expect it to come out and just throw it all over the lot in this way. It's really cool to see this system work with all the motion and everything, but not necessarily be set up off the run game. I mean, the run game has been not particularly effective, and it hasn't really happened a whole lot. So it's really, really cool to see. I mean, I think regardless of what happens this week in Buffalo, like, it's going to be, I mean, this is almost certainly the high point for Tua in fantasy, but it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if Waddle and Hill are both top 12 wide receivers all the rest of the way.
So let's have a call back to the opening question then. We were talking about Tom Brady a little bit and how he's down in everybody's rankings heading into this week. Tua's getting red hot and moving up in everybody's rankings. If somebody has Tom Brady and they're able to get Tua off waivers, who would you start this week, Tom Brady or Tua? Jacob, start us off.
This week, Tua. Rest of the season, I'd still prefer Brady.
Rich, same for you?
Yeah, I echo that. I mean, do you want to play the guy in the 41-point game total that we talk about, the two best players in the game are running backs, or do you want to play the guy in the 51-point game total that's littered with like amazingly good passing weapons?
Yep. No, I agree. Just, trying to help the viewers out here a little bit. I also have Tua ahead of Brady in my rankings this week. Now, this one, I mean, we're comparing a Beamer to a Benz here, but who's the wide receiver for the rest of the season that you prefer? Is it Jalen Waddle or Tyreek Hill? Rich, which guy do you prefer?
I still prefer Tyreek just because of how just the resume, but maybe I'm wrong on it just for the sample size. But I mean, Tyreek's been so damn good his entire career. And, he was made to play with Patrick Mahomes, but this guy was a top 10 wide receiver with Alex Smith. That month that Patrick Mahomes missed with that knee dislocation, he was still really good with Matt Moore. Like, this is what Tyreek does, man. People think he's just like a vertical guy. He's an actually really good NFL wide receiver. And I think he'll have more games like week 1 as outs too, right? Where he just gets like the 8 to 12 targets and he can have, 6 to 8 catches, where maybe Waddle's a little more feast or famine. But I might be wrong on that. These guys have 60% of the team targets. Yeah. Like, the ball's not going anywhere else. I feel pretty good about having either one of them.
Yeah. I think I both agree and disagree with Rich in the sense that I agree with sticking to priors. I had Waddle ranked ahead of Tyreek preseason, so I don't particularly see a reason to change that take through 2 weeks because they've both been fantastic. But I think obviously consensus was Hill over Waddle, and I don't see a reason to change that either. I think they're both going to be studs, and honestly, I think that they're going to be close enough in like all of the peripheral areas where I think probably the one who gets the most favorable end of the touchdown variance is the one who will finish ahead.
Yeah. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this game, we'll kind of talk about the Buffalo Bills offense as a whole. First of all, when we're looking at their running backs, it's kind of all over the place. We see Devin Singletary has 72 snaps, Zach Moss has 35, James Cook has 21, and then, of course, you've got Josh Allen taking a lot of the goal line and red zone carries there as well. And then throughout the offseason, we heard about all these sleepers. People were getting hyped about Jamison Crowder, Isaiah McKenzie, Dawson Knox. It seemed like everybody was a sleeper getting touted by one analyst out there. But we're seeing Josh Allen just spreading the ball out everywhere. So, Jacob, start us out here. Outside of Stephon Diggs and outside of Gabriel Davis, is there anybody that we're really confident starting on this Buffalo Bills offense? And of
No,
course, Josh Allen.
Yeah, of course, Josh Allen. No, I mean, it was a hard one for me because I kind of found myself. I was like, well, I want to be in on the Bills. Like, I want to be in on all these offenses. And the only guy that I actually have like a higher than market exposure to in best ball was Diggs. And I was about even with Gabe Davis. And I even kind of had to talk myself into Gabe Davis more as the season went along. Because I was like, I can't only be in on Diggs if this is the best team in the NFL. Like, somebody else has to hit here probably. But I'm just so out on Knox, like from a talent profile perspective, because he's just never earned the targets that I always thought he was pretty overpriced. He went in a range of tight ends where I don't tend to draft tight ends. And then like when the McKenzie thing started, like I like taking McKenzie in round 18, but I always saw McKenzie as more of like a reason not to take Crowder when Crowder was going high. And then when it flipped, then I was like, well, I also don't want to just take McKenzie where Crowder was going. Like I thought Crowder was a bad pick where he was going. Flipping them doesn't solve that. It just makes McKenzie a bad pick where they're both going. I threw some like late darts at Khalil Shakir, which kind of bothers me because I feel like my thesis was correct, which was that if either Diggs or Davis goes down, I don't think they're going to play Crowder or McKenzie on the outside. I think they're going to sub in somebody else. I didn't know that it would be Jake Kumaro. So that's unfortunate. Although hopefully if that situation arises maybe later in the season when Shakir's had more practice reps, maybe he ends up being the beneficiary of that instead of Kumaro. But the backfield's a hot mess right now. I mean, Zach Moss needs to get out of our lives. He's not good, but he eats up like just enough snaps to make the others not all particularly appealing. But I think until one gets phased out or injured, like they're kind of just in a feeling out process. Singletary just gets like the least valuable touches on the planet, and it makes him such an unappealing start. And then, I think Cook is a guy where I'm not like a big fan of the talent. I wasn't a big fan of the price, but I'd probably still be trying to send out some offers because I just think like I can't imagine they think Zach Moss is good. They've proved that they don't think Zach Moss is good over and over again with their actions. So they're not fooling us. Like, just give it up already.
Yeah, and the thing with Cook is if you're in a shallow league, you probably don't even have to send out offers for him. He's probably sitting on your waiver wire if you're in a 5-bench league right now. But I think we covered enough on that game, unless there's anything that you wanted to add, Rich. Outside of Diggs and Davis, I mean, that's pretty much all you're comfortable rolling out this week, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Bills will still score 40.
Exactly, and that's why those points are going to come
Reggie
somewhere.
Gilliam season.
Exactly, it's going to be Gilliam, it's going to be Kumaro, it's going to be their third string tight end. The ball is going to go somewhere, but it's not going to be the guys that we drafted late in those best ball drafts. So let's move on to the Philadelphia Eagles and Washington Commanders game. Another one that should be a little bit of a shootout. Let's talk about Miles Sanders. He's a workhorse right now in an explosive offense. We haven't really seen it translate into solid fantasy production quite yet. But, Rich, did we kind of make a mistake by fading Miles Sanders as hard as we did this offseason?
I don't know about fading him. He's doing what we kind of expected, right? Like he's basically an early down running back on a team that's led for a lot of snaps both two games. And that's kind of what his role is. Like if he scores a touchdown, it's going to be a guy that can flirt with like high RB2 production, maybe even have like an RB1 scoring week given that week. But when the Eagles trail, he'll probably not play a lot or be like really involved. So he's in a spot as a favorite here. Again, it's a road favorite, but we expect the Eagles to lead this game. So we're in the same role. Like he's probably going to lead the backfield in snaps and touches. You hope he falls in the end zone.
So yeah, I think his ceiling would be like 2021 Damian Harris, I think, but he's probably going to get vultured by Hurts and Scott and Gainwell too many times to reach that.
Yeah, so in games where we project them to possibly trail, who do you think is the running back then that would provide the value? Is that going to be Kenneth Gainwell? Is that going to be Boston Scott? Do we see Miles Sanders possibly get those targets in games where they could be trailing?
Well, I would have said Gainwell, but then he deflected a ball directly off his hands to the Minnesota Vikings and almost let them back in the game. So that might not bode particularly well for his chances. I don't think it's going to be Miles Sanders just because he's never really been. I don't even know that it's any running back. Like I just think that if they're behind, right? Like we're gonna. I just think that Jalen Hurts is gonna. He's going to throw to A.J. Brown. If he can't throw to A.J. Brown, he's going to throw to Devonta Smith. If he can't throw to Devonta Smith, he's going to throw to Dallas Goedert. If he can't throw to them, he's going to scramble. Like, I just don't know that he's going to throw all that much to running backs. Like, especially you see this with these rushing quarterbacks in comeback mode. Like, you see all these checkdowns to running back and comeback mode because teams are going to be playing deep, right? And they're going to be taking away the deep shots. And so people just toss it off to the tight end and to the running back over and over again, like Phillip Rivers and Tom Brady, etc. Like, but the version of that for Hurts is it's just going to be, he's going to scramble for 8 yards at a time instead. Like they're going to be like, okay, we're going to take away the deep stuff. And if you want to scramble, they're going to be fine with that because just try not to let him go out of bounds. He's going to scramble for 8 yards. He's going to burn time off the clock. The defense are going to allow that. And he's going to do that more than he's going to check down to Miles Sanders, I think. Or at least he's going to do that enough that like any running back or any committee of running backs that are getting those snaps, it's not going to convert to enough fantasy value. They also aren't going to lose that many games because they play the NFC East and the AFC South. So that's like 10 wins. So they're going to be like, I think they could easily win like 13 games.
Yeah. And, we talk all the time about how backfield committees are making running backs so undervalued, or not undervalued, overvalued in fantasy football, and how it's just completely cutting the legs out from all these running backs. But I think these Konami quarterbacks, these rushing quarterbacks, are just as detrimental to running backs because, like you said, they're vulturing goal line work, they're vulturing targets. So that's hurting them, with these new breeds of quarterbacks that are coming in, Josh Allen and guys like this. I mean, it's just making it really tough for running backs to get those points. Now we talked about AJ Brown a little bit, and everybody is rightfully enamored with AJ Brown. I mean, he's living up to the $100 million and the first round pick that Philadelphia invested in him. But Devonta Smith is leading all Philadelphia wide receivers in snaps and routes run. So we kind of saw it last week where he got going a little bit after a terrible week one. But Rich, are you still going out and trying to actively get Devonta Smith on your rosters, or is he going to be a pretty volatile week to week guy?
He might be volatile, but I still want him. I want good players, and he's proven to be a good player at any time he's played football. So, I mean, I'll gladly take him if nobody wants him. The problem with the Eagles, as you always will have, is just, how efficient will they be how consistently efficient will the passing game be? It was great last week when Jalen Hurts, was 80% completion rate and was lighting everything up as he wanted. But, in week one, he was 50% completion rate. They're probably going to have some variance there in that regard. And when he has those weeks like week one, it's probably going to be funneled more to one guy, where one guy ends up getting it in the offense. But I like good football players, and the Eagles have a bunch of them. So I'll take any good football player if anyone wants to let me have him.
I think Smith has appeal in every format because in best ball, he's going to have spike weeks. And then in managed, you just kind of maybe he's more of a bench play in managed. But if AJ Brown suffers an injury, which he's been known to do, unfortunately, then all of a sudden that's a really appealing spot for Devonta. And I think mostly, I just feel like every single week I'm going to be playing like Devonta Smith in DFS because he's either going to be the same price as somebody who projects way better than him, or AJ Brown's going to have a bunch of ownership. I just feel like there's always going to be reasons to be overweight on Devonta. And of course, in week one, he just ended my life. And then in week two, we didn't really get to do much with him on the showdown slate. But I think that's probably where I'm going to be playing him consistently. He'll probably just lose me money all year.
You never want to write off a year two wide receiver coming off a 900-yard rookie season. But Jacob,
as Jacob said, the Commanders are terrible. We talked about the communication issues the Ravens had. I mean, Washington, they were just leaving dudes uncovered 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
If Trevor Lawrence doesn't play as poorly as he did in week one, they might not even win that game where he missed 2 wide open touchdowns. But they've had just guys in both games just all alone in both games.
Yeah. I mean, what is
who's primarily been playing the slot?
Game? I think it's 30 or 31 point implied total for Philadelphia, and I think they blow that out of the water. I think this is going to be an absolute bloodbath in Washington this year. But let's go to the Commanders' offense. And Jacob, I'll throw this question to you because remember 2 years ago, we thought that Carson Wentz was going to the Bears for a short period of time. Remember there was that rumor that came out with the Tariq Cohen trade, and I was hyped up as a Bears fan. And then a week later, we found out that is a false rumor, and Carson Wentz went to the Indianapolis Colts. So you and I have had a lot of Carson Wentz discussions over the year. Please, God, tell me that we are not getting a Carson Wentz QB1 season again this year.
Buddy, as a Colts fan and as a former Carson Wentz defender, if Carson Wentz is everything that I was hoping he would be for the Colts last year and everything that I drafted him to be 2 years ago for the Eagles, and he does it on the Commanders this year, my soul will leave my body. No, I think it's noise. I think that it's just he's a very volatile quarterback who's shown to have very high-end stretches of play, even during bad years. Last year, he had multiple stretches of a couple games where he looked really great with Indianapolis. He did that even the year before in Philly when he was abjectly horrible. There was a 2-week stretch or a 3-week stretch in there where he put in some QB1 weeks and it was oh, he's coming back. And then he totally nosedived again. they played the Jaguars, and I know the Jaguars just shut out the Colts. I'm very aware of that, actually. But I don't think that they were playing like Ashton Doolin and Paris Campbell, a bunch of jabronis. So I think the Jaguars defense is nothing to be afraid of. Rich just talked about all the issues with the Lions defense. I think that Carson Wentz is about to face reality this week.
Yeah, I think so as well. Now let's play a quick game of keep, trade, cut. And we're going to look at the 3 wide receivers on the Washington Commanders right now. You know, Terry McLaurin's been kind of the disappointing one right now. Curtis Samuel's been the surprise. Jahan Dotson is doing what we thought he'd do as a first-round pick. So keep, trade, cut. Start us off here, Rich. Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin. How are we handling these wide receivers?
Ooh, yeah. When they play real defenses, it's going to be tougher too to kind of figure out. It's really hard because we talked on this extension of the Carson Wentz conversation. Like these guys are all good. Like Carson Wentz is actually playing with good players too, which is something that's helped. And Scott Turner's doing a really good job to start the season. Yeah, I mean he hasn't played with a lot of like great, really good receivers. I don't know if any of these guys are great, but this is definitely the best group of playmakers he's had in a while. Man, I'm really scared of what you've seen for the start of the season to Terry McLaurin. He's basically lived as a deep threat because we've had 2 games where Wentz was like a QB1. He's a top 5 quarterback both weeks, and McLaurin really didn't go along for the ride. He wasn't even a top 24 scorer in either game. His team target share is way down to start the year than where it was when he was playing across from guys like Diami Brown and Cam Sims, and Steven Sims and whatever Sims that you can find, and Curtis Samuel, the last time he played a full season, led all NFL wide receivers in touches. So he's getting extremely really good usage, and it's probably the most sustainable of the guys because he gets the low ADOT stuff. Jahan Dotson is living on touchdowns right now. He's the guy that scares me the most, and I was really into him in rookie drafts. And it's part of me wants to just sink in and be like, yes, this is everything, all the confirmation bias I needed. But he's got target shares at 13% and 11%. You take away these touchdowns, which I don't want to take away, but he's in expected points, wide receiver 50. It's really tough. I would still lean towards wanting McLaurin, I guess. I don't know. I don't feel good. I don't feel good on any of these answers. I'm just copping out.
I'm terrified on Dotson. I'm so terrified about Dotson in both directions. He was a prospect that I feel like I've been caught in the middle on him forever. He was a prospect that I didn't think that I'd be very into because he was a late declare player, late breakout player. And I was I'm probably going to not like this guy. And then he went in the first round. I was well, that's pretty interesting.
Well, you got to take that with a grain of salt because it's Washington selecting him in the first round.
Well,
that's a lot different than a competent franchise taking somebody in the first round.
I just felt the market was way wrong on him. I remember JJ wrote this post. He was why do you all hate Jahan Dotson? And I kind of felt the same way where during last year's college season, I was this is probably a guy I'm going to have a full fade on. And then his draft prop was 32.5. He was getting routinely mocked in the first round. That was one of my biggest bets that he would go under 32.5. And I was drafting him in all of these big board underdog drafts, round 15, 16. I was he's going to go in the first round. And then he went in the first round. I was awesome. Got all this closing line value on Dotson. Now I never have to draft him again. And everyone was yeah, we don't actually care at all that he went in the first round. We're just going to keep drafting him in round 14. I was all right. So he's my most drafted player in best ball. Him and Garrett Wilson, I think, were tied. And then in dynasty drafts, people were drafting Christian Watson ahead of this guy. I was well, I guess I have to just take Jahan Dotson and all these. I'm people are drafting James Cook ahead of him. I'm can we not? All right,
Sky Moore,
whatever.
George
Fine.
Pickens, they were all going ahead of Dotson.
Yeah, so I have way more dots than I wanted, and I'm so torn because I think that he's a clear, based on the usage in 2 weeks, he's what a sell looks like, right? It's when someone's just living on touchdowns, they're not actually getting all that many targets, but at the same time, he's a rookie, and we know that rookie wide receivers usually show efficiency before they show volume. So I think it's entirely possible that for now it's unsustainable. And then we fast forward 2 months and it's oh, okay, well now his touchdown rates have come back to earth, but he's just earning a 20% target share because he was a rookie. And it's not surprising that he didn't earn 1 million targets in his first 2 weeks. So I don't know. I'm kind of back and forth on him. I guess, the one thing I would say on McLaurin is that he, I think, had always been a little bit overrated, even though he's very good. but I think was still a little bit overrated in that Washington just doesn't like substitute personnel. Like if someone's out there, they just tend to run like literally every single route. And so his targets per route run were always a little bit less inspiring than his like raw target shares and prairie yard shares usually were. And now he's actually running less routes than Jahan Dotson. He's actually facing real competition. So I think it's a little bit of a different situation than he's in or he's been in the past. And yeah, I think it's just a tough environment. And Logan Thomas is ramping up in routes. And say what you want about Logan Thomas, but he always earns targets. So he's now ramping up in routes and he's getting work. So it's just it's a bit of a difficult situation. It might be too spread, and it's worked while Wentz is like dealing, but I don't think that we're going to see this all year. So I don't know. There might not be a top 24 wide receiver on this team by the end of the season. It actually wouldn't surprise me if that was the case.
Yeah, I mean, that would just be the most Carson Wentz thing ever. Him finishing as a wide receiver 1 and not producing a single fantasy viable wide receiver out of the bunch. Sorry, finishing as a QB1. But let's go ahead rapid fire real quickly. I want to cover one more game, the Los Angeles Rams and the Arizona Cardinals. And we only have a few minutes left here. But I want to talk about Allen Robinson because he stumbled into the end zone, which kind of, saved his outing last week. But he's only got 7 targets on the year. So now going up against the Cardinals, talk me through this, Jacob. I mean, where are you ranking Allen Robinson? Is he even a top 36 wide receiver this week?
Yeah, probably in the top 36. I don't know. I don't do the weekly ranks like you guys do. So props to you. Considerably more effort than I put into this. But I don't know. Yeah, Allen Robinson, it felt like last week they like tried to do the thing where they're like, all right, we're going to get Robinson involved. And like all of his plays very much, except for that one crosser, but the rest of his plays very much felt like they were like forcibly trying to get him involved. And then when they went back into the flow of their offense, he kind of just got lost in the shuffle again. I don't know. My take in this, like in pre-draft was that Allen Robinson is like probably a small win if he's not washed, and he might be totally washed. So I think I don't know if I have a share, but he's definitely, he'd be a guy that I'd be concerned about, and definitely like off the touchdown last week. Like I have some dynasty shares just from like this guy's way cheaper in dynasty than he is in his redraft type of like game theory perspective. And I'm really trying to sell those. Maybe too many people listen to this show that are in my league, so I just ruined any chances that I have. But anyway, if I can, if you're out there, a couple second round picks will do it.
A couple second round picks. All right, I might send those your way. So Rich, how do you feel? I mean, is Allen Robinson, where do you have him in your rankings this week? Where did he fall in?
Yeah, I have him as it's basically a touchdown dependent wide receiver 3. Like I don't think he's a guy that's going to really produce a lot of yardage on a weekly basis, command a lot of targets. We kind of lived this life with Odell Beckham a little bit at the end of last season. I think he offers a lot more value to the Rams offense than the Rams offense offers to him. And we're kind of seeing that playing out for 2 weeks. I think they will utilize him in the red zone. Like there's going to be weeks. Like we saw this with Odell too. Like he's going to get in the box sometimes. I wouldn't be surprised if like Allen Robinson ends up having like 8 or 9 touchdowns at the end of the year. But it's going to be pretty frustrating from a fantasy stance in the weeks he doesn't score. So I just don't think he's going to be a big yardage and target earner.
Yeah, kind of agree with that. Unfortunately, I thought this was going to be a bounce back for Allen Robinson, but he just does not look like his old self.
But if Cooper Kupp gets hurt, then who knows? Then you can readjust the goalposts.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, I think if Cooper Kupp gets hurt, I think their offense might suck.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't looked great so far through 2 weeks, but the last guy I want to talk about is Zach Ertz. 15 targets through 2 weeks, currently the tight end 5 in scoring. Is this something that we can expect to last throughout the season, or is he just, a prime sell high candidate before DeAndre Hopkins comes back? Rich, start us off here. How are we feeling about Zach Ertz?
He's gonna just get you that nice baseline tight end production that you need. He's one of those guys that like will routinely be like the tight end like 8 to 12 every week in weekly scoring, and then if he just doesn't get hurt, will be like the tight end 5 in season scoring. But then once DeAndre Hopkins is back, he's clearly the third like most talented guy to throw the football to. And if you look at since he's joined the Cardinals, his on-off splits with DeAndre Hopkins really tell a significant story as well, too. So I would be a little concerned that when DeAndre Hopkins comes back, paired with having Marquise Brown, that he kind of gets squeezed out. But we just want those guys to get healthy so Kyler can start completing passes.
Ertz is canned meat, man. Like it's like in economics, we talk about inferior goods, like goods that go up in poor economies. Like with no Rondale and no Hopkins and Cliff being a total dolt and just like being like Marquise Brown, just like do whatever you can do, I guess. We're not going to scheme anything or like try. Then, it ends up just with the ball goes to the part of the field the defense is sort of least concerned about. And that's usually Ertz. So like he's a canned meat tight end. He's going to get production, at least for the first 6 weeks of the season for sure. I have been like one FFPC league with the tight end premium in the football guys that I've just been rolling them out and like cringing my way to 15 points in the tight end premium scoring. But I think, yeah, once Hopkins comes back, I think the ceiling's going to come down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much what I was saying all offseason is Zach Ertz is like the last guy that you can draft that's just a set him and forget him tight end. You're not going to feel great about it. He's never going to give you those Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce boom weeks, but you can just keep him in your lineup every single week. And, you're getting, minimum 4 to 5 points. Occasionally he'll stumble to the end zone and have a big game. And that's kind of what you're getting from Zach Ertz. But guys, this was a great show. We got to wrap it up. Unfortunately, I could keep talking to you guys for hours, but I don't want to go over the 1 hour mark here. Before we sign off, one more time, Rich, let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
At Lord Reeves on Twitter, Sharp Football Analysis. I will continue talking to Jacob. He's going to be my guest on the Sharp Angles podcast this week. So if you liked hearing him after you listen to this, go over there and listen to that show.
Absolutely. Jacob, let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, FF_RTGB. I'm doing 4 shows a week right now. So, 3 LOL, they say, about your last year in law school. And I guess you're spending a lot of podcasts about fantasy football. You can find me on Twitter, F_RTGB. You can find Sweat and Bullets, the new show I debut with Drew, up on anywhere you can get podcasts. You can find the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast on Tuesdays, Fantasy Intervention on Wednesdays, and then the Big Tilt on the Roto Underworld Radio Network on Fridays. That's the DFS show.
Busy man. And of course, I am Dave Kluge. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. Be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys if you have not already. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for checking this episode out. As always, be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys. Give us a thumbs up on this video below so other people can find it. And if you have anything that you want to add, drop it in the replies below. Thank you so much for checking this week's episode of The Launchpad out, and I'll see you next week.